Greetings, this is Eugene the Philosopher, the greatest living philosopher after the unfortunate passing of Quentin Robert D. Nameland, who has been the greatest living philosopher before me. Let's talk about an interesting alternative science community, if you might say so, called Suspicious Observers here, and in particular their leader, Ben Davidson. And, well, really, it's not, well, okay, forget about it. So, just to give you a bit of a background on myself in connection to this movement, so to speak, I have subscribed to Suspicious Observers YouTube channel in July 2014 or about so, and I've been closely following it, like almost watching it every day for maybe 3 years or something like that, so until maybe 2017 or something like that. And I found their playlists on, let's say, educational playlists like Learn About the Sun or whatever it's called, and also the links that Ben posted under many of his videos, like links on actual sources of data, etc. Very helpful. Like really, you can learn from that if you are a complete beginner, let's say, if you don't know anything about the sun, if you don't know where to look for data. That was like really useful for me, at least at that time, right? Let's say in 2014. And also from there, from this channel, I've learned about Thunderbolts project. And like in one of the videos, maybe it was Fly on the Wall even, because I bought even premium in 2014, Ben recommended Symbols of an Alien Sky by Thunderbolts project, and I watched this movie just because Ben recommended it, and that was sort of my own window to the Electric Universe community, and I started watching Thunderbolts project channel because of that, only because of that, I would say, because otherwise I wouldn't even find it in the first place. And then, so afterwards, I was involved in other Electric Universe things, but that's a separate story. But anyway, Ben himself invited me to speak at a couple of his conferences in 2000 and actually maybe it was 3. I don't even remember now. Oh damn, that becomes okay. So at least 2, maybe even 3 of his conferences, and I spoke there, gave my presentations, and he paid for my trips, etc. So the last conference I was to was OTF 2019 in February of 2019, and it was quite a privilege. So I wish to thank him for doing that for me, and I wish to express my thanks to all the Suspicious Observers community for, well, letting me present my ideas to them, essentially. So, yeah, thank you guys if you're watching this, both Ben and Suspicious Observers. But at the same time, this video is not going to be about praising any of those. It's actually going to be quite critical, because I would say that in recent, let's say, a year and a half, I almost don't watch the channel anymore. And when I say almost don't watch, I mean I watch it like maybe once a month, like I watch a couple of videos or something like that, because I've noticed, again, long ago, by long ago I mean a couple of years or a year and a half at least, that it has started drifting into some unpleasant territory, at least for me. And what I mean by that is that, well, okay, maybe it was actually my own kind of reflecting upon this, just what I just said. Maybe it was my own disillusionment, if that's even a word, with the channel itself. So maybe, well, you know, there's a saying, I'm not sure if there's such a saying in English, but in Russian they say that if a student, or maybe it was Friedrich Nietzsche actually, if a student didn't sort of overgrown their teacher, they still remain a student. So you have to overcome your teacher, sort of, right? Or, well, it sounds sort of pathetic and kind of super stupid, but goes something like that, basically. So if you still adore your teacher, it means that you're still a student of theirs, and basically you haven't learned anything, right? You haven't gotten better than your teacher. Like, if you haven't got, let's say in your family, if your father is your teacher, you haven't gotten better than your father, etc. You're still a next generation, so to speak. You're not better, right? Okay, that was pathetic, really. So anyway, my problem is that I felt increasingly, let's say 2 years ago, increasingly more and more frustrated and disappointed and confused, maybe, with the content of this channel and the whole community. Well, really what it is Ben speaking something, community is just silent. So I have a feeling that he's really pushing some agenda, I would say, and like he's like drifting into a realm of propaganda instead of the realm of science, you know, something like that. That's probably the best way I can formulate this. So, and the two topics that I would bring up as examples that kind of most troubling for me is the, let's say, tentatively call it the topic of a sun is going to explode soon, and soon is an important word here. And the other one is that the Earth's magnetic field is going to switch soon. You know, the poles are gonna shift places, etc. And the problem I have with these statements is that it seems like no critical assessment has been made and is made and would be made in this regard. So, and by the way, now that I think of it, a third statement probably comes to mind, which is we're heading into a grand solar minimum, which is another statement that I kind of blindly agreed when I was watching, like in, let's say 5 years ago, Suspicious Observers channel on YouTube. So I thought, well, yeah, it seems so. But now that I think of it, like, what is the evidence that we're heading to a grand solar minimum? And I cannot think of any evidence. Like, it's almost ridiculous. Like, how could I have been so misled, like, uncritical about it, you know? Because, well, what is the evidence? There's no evidence, you know? Well, okay, solar cycles kind of diminish in power, but it's the same thing we know for sure happened, let's say, during Dalton minimum, but we're still higher than the Dalton minimum. And we know about the Maunder minimum, at least through some secondary accounts, though people didn't really count sunspots back then, but we know that Maunder, almost for sure that Maunder minimum happened, which was even deeper than the Dalton minimum. And we're still not even close to that. So why do we suppose that some grand minimum would happen? That's a big mystery. I don't really know. I can't even trace where this idea comes from, but I just encourage you to think critically about it. Like, why do you think that the grand minimum is going to happen? It's a good question. Like, really think about it. Why do you think it? And, well, okay. So I've mentioned these two other ideas. So, and anyway, it almost looks like in this case, in both cases, and in the case of the grand solar minimum, the idea actually comes first, and the evidence is looked for afterwards, or something like that. So, but unfortunately, in this approach, you can prove almost anything. But the good thing, on the other hand, is that you can disprove anything with the same approach. So I claim, with all seriousness, that you can disprove both those ideas. Both that the sun is going to explode and that the Earth's magnetic poles are going to, you know, flip or whatever, and that we're heading to a grand minimum. You can also disprove that. All right. So I kind of I don't know, somehow randomly remember the idea that in one of the recent videos, like I deliberately watched a lot of videos from Suspicious Observers today. So in one of the videos, there's an idea that, oh, you know, some research shows that recently, even with this weak solar wind, let's say, we have stronger aurorae, stronger magnetic storms, etc. And this is interpreted under the sauce of this idea that, you know, Earth's magnetic field is going to disappear and flip or whatever, right? But again, if you read Alfvén, if you're into, let's say, Berkel and Alfvén's model of magnetic storms and aurorae, you know that it's actually the magnetic field of Earth that drives aurorae and magnetic storms. So what happens in magnetic storms is kinetic energy of the solar wind. So the solar wind just blows. Well, it's of course a metaphor, so to speak, but it blows against the Earth, I guess, against the Earth's magnetosphere. And the Earth's magnetosphere, how would you say it? Transposes, transmits, I don't know. So damn, what's the right word? So it takes the energy, this kinetic energy of the solar wind, and it transforms it into the energy of electric currents in Earth's magnetosphere. So, and the stronger are the electric currents in the magnetosphere, the stronger are the, well, perturbations of the field itself, right? Because it's the currents which are driving the perturbations. So just as well, you might argue that actually Earth's magnetic field is getting stronger because even weaker solar wind drives stronger currents, which produce stronger aurorae and stronger magnetic perturbations. So just as I've said, you can easily disprove like this idea just out of the blue, so to speak. Okay. Yeah, so regarding the magnetic field of Earth, like Ben keeps claiming that, well, it's dropping like dramatically and we're all gonna die, right? It's a very famous sentiment, very popular sentiment, I might add. So in support of that, he brings forth like these whatever data, press releases or whatever. But if you look at the actual models of the, let's say, dipolar moment of the magnetic field of Earth, you would see that it's only dropping. I might actually bring forth the charts on the screen if I wouldn't forget. If I would, then I'd put in the links in the description. But anyway, so some models show that the magnetic field of Earth is only decreasing since 1600s. Before that, it was actually increasing. And in fact, the peak of the magnetic field of Earth was actually during Maunder minimum, like in the late 1600s. So that's one set of models. The other set of models shows that the magnetic field of Earth actually peaked on larger timescales, at least. It actually peaked around 700s CE or AD, whatever you prefer. So yeah, it's kind of problematic, you know. It looks almost like the same cherry picking as we have in climate change, you know. I've talked about in my video Stories of Medicine, where you arbitrarily pick a norm, so to speak, where Ben picks 1600s as the norm of the magnetic field of Earth, whereas climate, global warming advocates or propagandists pick arbitrarily like the middle of the 1800s as the climatic norm, whereas, you know, there were supposedly, again, billions of years before that. So why would you do that? Like, why would you pick that small moment in time as the norm? And the same question is applicable to the magnetic field. Like, you can easily imagine a situation where, let's imagine an alternative history where, let's say in the year 900 AD or CE or whatever, people had magnetometers, and they started, measuring the magnetic field. So according to the second model that I brought up, the second chart, the magnetic field was dropping already then, right? So what would they think? Well, damn, oh my God, we're all gonna die. The magnetic field of Earth is gonna flip. The sun is gonna explode. Oh damn, we are so doomed. We are so doomed. And there would be, some guy, some Benjaminus Davidsonus, who would claim all those things and sell his books, etc., like these apocalyptic prophecies. And books were actually quite expensive back then, so he made a fortune back then. Okay, so yeah, that's one problem. The problem is, again, I repeat, is that you can actually disprove all those ideas as easily as you can prove them, right? So they're not falsifiable. I'm sorry, they're not really scientific. But anyway, let's move on. So another problem I have with these ideas is that there is, at least I haven't seen on Suspicious Observers channel, no physical mechanism for this pole flip during, let's say, a super strong solar outburst. There's no mechanism. It's just like hand waving, like, hey, we have super strong solar outburst, then maybe the poles would flip. Why? How? Nobody knows. I don't know. Like, maybe, please tell me. Maybe there's some sound mechanism that, yeah, they can flip. Well, first of all, we don't even know how the Earth's magnetic field is produced, how the sun's magnetic field is produced. So it's a bunch of unknowns. So you're just traveling in the dark and carving hypotheses out of nowhere, essentially. There's no proof of anything here. And this is very bad. This is very bad for these hypotheses, I would say. So, okay, there's no physical mechanism for pole flip due to super strong CME or exploding sun or whatever. And there is no physical mechanism for the sun exploding due to some mysterious crossing of the galactic current sheet, Like, what is the mechanism? How does it work? Like show me. Well, what is the galactic current sheet? It's like the current flowing like in a circular sheet so that it would have one magnetization in one hemisphere and another in the other. So show me how, if it impacts a star, the star would somehow explode. Show me, like, please show me. Like, how does it happen? I don't know. Please show me again. This is my concern. I don't see how it should happen. All right. Yeah. And the whole analogy between the galactic and, let's say, solar magnetic fields is questionable, to me at least. And there was one occasion in one of the videos when on Suspicious Observers channel, Ben said that, I quote almost literally, current sheet is a double layer. And I almost choked myself to death on this sentence because, well, please read Hannah Salveen's Cosmic Plasma. Please. That's what I would answer to this, okay? So, again, the whole mechanistic, physical, scientific side of things is just replaced in all of those hypotheses, is just replaced by some, again, hand-waving and repeating of the word electromagnetic as some mantra, It's electromagnetic, it's electromagnetic. All is electromagnetic, then this is also electromagnetic, then it should be true. Something like that. And I hope that on some intuitive level you can feel that, you can see that. Because, again, I don't see any mechanisms, I don't see any theories, like strictly described concrete theories of how it should happen, how it could happen at least, right? Just hand waving. And again, if we're speaking about the galactic current sheet, the timescales of these supposedly each 12,000 years, etc., they're completely wrong. I mean, the galaxy rotates with the timescales of like tens of millions of years, or at least, or maybe even hundreds of millions of years. So what are we talking about? It's like 1,000 times more than what you need. So it should be something other than the galaxy. Maybe, again, sort of proposing other avenue of research. If you still want to pursue this exploding sun idea, well, take a look at the interstellar plasma clouds. Take a look at the local interstellar chimney, or how is it called? Yeah, I think it's called local interstellar chimney, but something like that. So there's a local interstellar cloud, a few, let's say 30 light years in size, and there's this local chimney which is like, let's say 300 light years in size, or maybe 300 parsecs, which would be 1,000 light years. And these local magnetic fields, they are much more impactful on the sun than the galactic magnetic field, because, well, it's all structurized, it's all shielded from one another, you know. So again, like, it looks so far-fetched. Oh my God, I don't even know what to say here. But okay, let's proceed. So I wish to talk a little bit about this term micronova, you know, for this solar explosion, hypothetical one. So, and I'm kind of pissed off by this term personally. Maybe, I don't know, it's just that, like, what is a micronova? It's like 1,000 nanonovae, or like 1 million femtonovae, or it's like 1,000th of a millinova. Like, I don't know. It sounds really silly, and sounds almost, you know, like some Slavic chick's last name, like, you know, Yekaterina Micronova, you know, something like that. Yeah, I mean, if I would have come up with this idea, and I mean, it's completely irrelevant, but for satirical purposes, I would put it here. I would call it like subnova, because, well, we have nova, we have supernova. Well, because super is more than nova, then what is less than nova? Well, it's subnova, right? It makes sense. But micronova, why? I mean, that just is beyond me, or below me, I don't know. Depends on your stance on this subject. So, although I should admit that from a technical perspective, from a marketing perspective, you might say, the term is cool, almost brilliant, I would say, because, well, in general, any new term is, like, to coin a new term means it would be forever associated with you, right? So anyone that Googles micronova, because nobody else uses this term except for the followers of Ben Davidson, it means it would lead you to Ben Davidson, right? And suspicious observers. So yeah, it's a really cool move. Like I appreciate it. And I mean, no sarcasm here. Like, it's a really good move. It's recognizable, and it leads you where you should go, according to the author of the term, right? To them. But at the same time, I should add that if there's anything we've learned from, well, okay, that's a bad formulation, but something we have learned from Planescape Torment RPGs, that names are actually dangerous. Because when you call yourself some name, or call your idea, like, put some name on it, like a label, let's say, they can be easily attacked, because they from now on, they can be recognized by culture and destroyed through that. And it happened to a lot of, let's say, alternative scientists, a lot of alternative ideas, when they come up with some new term. And, you know, scientific community doesn't like new terms. They tend to attack them really quickly and dismantle them. And like, well, you might think about a lot of so-called pseudoscientific, again, see my video about pseudoscience and scientific pyramids. So pseudoscientific terminology that was discarded by mainstream science. And if you even use the term from this catalog, so to speak, you are like, just, they don't even allow you in, so to speak, right? They just throw you away right away, even not listening to you. So this might backfire, this term micronova, or Ekaterina Micronova, you know. Yeah, in the long run, I mean, when it would be more or less recognized. Just like, you know, term cold fusion became like pretty much non grata, so to speak, in scientific community. So people had to come up with another term, LENR, low energy nuclear reactions. So maybe Ekaterina Micronova would have to change her last name. Maybe she would marry some other dude. Who knows? Okay, so what was I talking about? Yeah, so another thing that kind of bothers me about Suspicious Observers channel is this eternal, I would say, sloppiness in reporting papers. Like, you know, in almost each day, there's like 3 to 5 to maybe 7 scientific papers that are described there, and like the short version of their conclusions and the reaction of Ben Davidson to these conclusions are given. So there's a lot of cases when these papers and their conclusions are seriously misrepresented, and I've encountered this more than once, and each time it makes me, well, this is a trending word, cringe, you know, sort of I don't know, disappointed, confused, like frustrated. Like when you read the actual paper, it actually doesn't say what the things that it was represented as on Suspicious Observers channel, and it's not a good thing. And some recklessness in statements that Ben demonstrates, like when he drops some, especially again in the last like a year and a half or maybe 2 years, when he drops some like extreme statement, like really extreme statement in the middle of a sentence, and then just like blah blah blah, the sun's gonna explode in 20 years, blah 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 blah, and just goes on as if nothing happened, you know, and there's no scrutiny, there's no like, I don't know, scientific inquiry into it, etc. It's just I don't know, some vulgarizing spirit in it, which is unhealthy, like super unhealthy. Okay. So, and another thing I wanted to note is that Ben seems to try to like sit on 2 chairs, if that's even a thing in English, like, and there's a certain hypocrisy to it. Like, and what do I mean by 2 chairs is, I mean like the mainstream science, again, see my video about pseudoscience, because I really hate the term mainstream science, but anyway, the mainstream science is one chair, and the other chair is these more extreme pseudoscientific ideas, right? But he wants to have both simultaneously, sort of. So, and this represents a certain hypocrisy, in my opinion. For example, well, it's not quite pseudoscience, but still it's not really acknowledged in the scientific community today. So he denies magnetic reconnection. I myself also, I'm a follower of Alvin. So also, yeah, here I agree, like magnetic reconnection sucks. So Ben acknowledges this, he denies magnetic reconnection, cool. So this is more or less alternative science, it's this other chair. But at the same time, like with it, he just throws into you papers and like these, you know, scientific modeling, like fancy pictures and videos of modeling made with the use of magnetic reconnection, made by mainstream scientists. So how is it supposed to work? Like, why do you do that? Like, what? Why? Like, what? I mean, it's just stupid. I mean, it's just, I mean, I can understand people, let's say, from Electric Universe community, not all people, but some people from the Electric Universe community, they just kind of throw the whole thing out. They just say magnetic reconnection, dark matter, dark energy, Einstein, quantum mechanics, this is all rubbish, let's just throw it all away. Let's just ignore like all these hundreds of thousands of experiments, let's say, in quantum mechanics. Let's just not propose any alternative to quantum mechanics to describe those experiments. Let's just forget about all that, all these 100 years of experiments. And it's all bad science. Let's just forget about it. I can understand that because at least it's coherent. Like it's wrong in my opinion, but at least it's coherent because it's just, F all that, you know. But Ben, he tries to say, well, okay, this is probably wrong and this is probably right. So, and kind of, well, I don't know. And two things that contradict each other directly, like Alf Vane, who says that magnetic reconnection is not true, and people who use magnetic reconnection to model, let's say, the rotation of galaxies or whatever, like interstellar filaments, and he kind of brings to you both of those, whatever, like, why? I mean, I don't understand this. Seriously. It's really the lack of critical thinking, in my opinion. It's a lack of certain honesty, I would say, even. Like, either don't bring it up, or, I don't know, or criticize it, or, I don't know, like, do something coherent. I mean, okay. That was a bit emotional. Sorry for that. So yeah, magnetic reconnection. And so it's almost like he simultaneously is supposedly supported by mainstream science when he quotes, let's say, papers that he does like. And at the same time, he denies the mainstream science when he doesn't like it. Like, almost in every video, he criticizes mainstream papers on, let's say, dark matter and cosmology or whatever. So yeah, so it seems like he nods to the papers that support him, but kind of throws away the papers that don't support him, right? Something like that. So he's only he only acknowledges authority when it's suitable, basically, and then he denies authority when it's not. So yeah, something like that, I would say. And again, if some paper supports his extreme hypotheses, like this exploding sun and flipping magnetic poles, I mean, soon, in the next, let's say, 20 years, he quotes them. If they don't support these ideas, he just ignores them. And so, and by doing that, even those papers that support his opinions, if you've listened to my previous videos on science and how science works, you know that any paper is actually a network because it has like 100 of citations. So it's based on a lot of models and theories, etc. So even those papers that support his opinion are probably most likely 2/3 at least based on something he wouldn't agree with, right? So how can you then be supported by this paper if it's based on something that you don't acknowledge, you deny, you are against, basically? So yeah, it's another big problem. So I guess what I'm saying is it all needs to be deconstructed, like, really carefully. Somebody needs to sit down and like write down a good fundamental critique of what's going on, basically, like envelop all these envelopes, you know, something like that. And yeah. Okay, so we're kind of moving to the end here, hopefully, at least. So, like, why is that happening? The question arises in my head. And again, this whole video is just my opinion and my attempt at understand what's going on. So, one thought I've had, it's like a psychological interpretation, I guess, is that, well, maybe he's just tired. You know, the guy is just tired because, well, think about it. He was like putting on videos each day, I think, for the last 10 years or about so. Like, just think about this schedule. I mean, anyone can just go nuts with that kind of schedule. Like, I wouldn't be able to handle that. Like, I would probably kill myself after 2 years or even earlier. So yeah, there's some really, it's bizarre at the very least, right? This kind of schedule. So and another obvious thing, I'm not implying that he's like mentally ill. I'm just saying that it kind of, this kind of schedule brings you into a certain kind of mood, you know, where you can't really be skeptical. You can't really be careful. You can't really think in the first place, because in order to think, you need time, you know, just as I've said in my very previous video, Inheritance of Ideas. In order to produce some thought, you need like your internal ensembles of power to regroup, so to speak, regarding this new information that you just received. I mean, sometimes it happens quickly because, well, maybe this new group was already there. It just didn't kind of snap into existence yet. But this new information kind of solidified it as a single entity, as an idea. But in order to produce new ideas which are viable, you need to think, which means you need time. Like a good research requires at least a month, maybe several months, maybe even a year. You know, you have to keep on thinking about stuff. But when you're required to produce stuff like en masse, so to speak, every day almost as a conveyor belt or something, that's not thinking. It's something else. It's really something else. Something different, I would say. So that might explain this sort of recklessness and uncritical approach to his own thoughts and ideas he took from somebody else, just took them for granted. Again, I'm not saying I'm any better than this. Again, I've took many ideas from, again, Ben and Electric Universe people, Thunderbolts, etc., many other people. But then, like, when I thought about it for a couple of years, I've been able to, like, see that it's not a good idea, maybe, or at least it's an unfounded idea, right? Something like that. So, yeah. Again, see this grand solar minimum. Like, why did I believe that we're moving into a grand solar minimum? Like, what is the evidence? That there's really no evidence. Damn, like it's so silly. I mean, how could I be fooled so easily? And I don't mean fooled that in the sense that there would be no grand solar minimum, because who knows, maybe there would be, but there is no evidence. That's what I'm saying. Like, yeah, the sun's getting weaker, but it's still not even as weak as it was 200 years ago, right? So why? Oh, that's such a shame, damn. And I admit, I kind of failed here, like I was misled, and so easily, damn. Okay, another interpretation you might put forth, which is more of a malevolent sort, you know, and those two are, by the way, not only interpretations you can come up with, is just two, as an example, let's say. There are many more probably, and I have no idea what happens in his head, so I can't really tell, and his pocket, we should say. Okay, so another idea is conspiracy theory, so check it out. So, and by the way, it's somewhat inspired by one Romanian guy who lives in France, at least used to live in France, because I talked to him like 5 years ago last time, or maybe 4 years ago. He had a channel on YouTube called Go to Space, without spaces, ironically. So we talked on Skype once, or maybe more than once, and he said that, you know, Ben Davidson would have to find some other idea. Again, speaking about inheritance of ideas, this is where I got this from. You see, that this little speck in my memory of that conversation probably brought it up. So anyway, so he told me that, you know, we're heading into a solar minimum. I mean, it was 2015, so it was still, the sun was still active. So he said, Ben Davidson would have to invent something new, you know, because the sun wouldn't be active, so it wouldn't be as fun anymore observing it. So this is the idea again, behind this conspiracy theory, is that, well, since we have the solar minimum right now and nothing happens on the sun pretty much, then a channel like Suspicious Observers that has like 0.5 million people watching it every day, it would need some new, brand new idea for people to get excited about, you know, Panem et Circuses, you know, to get entertained. So this new idea might be, again, the coming end of the world. Why not? I mean, in 20 years, the sun's gonna explode, we're all gonna die. Sounds like a cool idea, because why not? And again, as I've said in my video, Coronavirus and Culture, Americans love the idea of the end of the world. It's pretty much one of the foundational ideas of America in the first place. So to repeat my thought, if you don't want to review my video about coronavirus, so what I said there is that Americans are so obsessed with the end of the world because they know for a fact how their country was built. So it was all recorded history and very recent, like 400 years, let's say. So they know that their country is actually built on a very shallow foundation, so to speak. And therefore, they think their country might be as easily destroyed. And well, therefore, probably the whole world can be destroyed just as easily. Whereas in Europe, we don't remember our foundation. We think there is at least some segment of our imagination that thinks that we are eternal in some sense, you know. So Europeans aren't as excited about the end of the world. They, strictly speaking, don't care about it. So, yeah, so it's definitely more of an American idea. Again, I've brought up Velikovsky as an example. Why did Velikovsky became so famous in the United States? Well, because the soil was really fertile for these kinds of ideas there, right? Okay, so to sort of conclude this long rant, I would say that, yeah, in general, like what was the purpose of this video is just to express my frustration and confusion and disappointment about the recent 1.5 / 2 years or dash 2 years of content on the channel Suspicious Observers. And of course, like if somebody asked me what I think about Suspicious Observers, I would tell them something like that. But since nobody asked, I had to ask myself and record this video. As they say in Russian, again, if you don't praise yourself, nobody would praise you. Something like that. So, yeah. Okay, and I wish to reiterate again that my problem with these extreme hypotheses isn't at all their extremity, let's say. Well, that's a biological term, isn't it? Anatomical. Anyway, so my problem isn't that they are radical, but that they are given at this channel, not my, but Suspicious Observers, as facts. And I detest that. Like, it really looks sick. I'm really feeling like I'm being sold something. And it's not good. I mean, in scientific terms, it's just rubbish. So, yeah. So when hypotheses are being promoted as heavily as every day you get like a segment of like at least a half a minute saying, you know, the sun is actually going to explode, watch this playlist. No, this is sick. This is very, very sick. When they're being promoted and propagandized like that. Okay, and as a PS to this video, I wish to say that when I started watching a Suspicious Observers channel, I actually, like, almost for a month, I think, I couldn't remember the name of the channel because I kept typing in the search window skeptical observers or like skeptical and something. So that's how I remembered it in the first month, and only like a month later I've finally remembered that it was actually suspicious observer. So I kept typing skeptical observers. And I would recommend any of you, if you are a suspicious observer, so any of you suspicious observers, to be at least sometimes skeptical observers. And take it with a grain of salt, all of it. So be vigilant, Reva Scholl, I love you. Thank you for watching. The eons are closing.